I'm very humbled and proud to be here today, and I feel a little bit vulnerable because I am not a psychologist. I'm just a curious former CEO. And I'm going to champion a guy who really helped me through my most difficult time in business, but someone who's a little old school, Abe Maslow. And you'll understand a little bit more as I give my talk. But whether during the 1970s, Abe died in 1970. During the 1970s and 80s, Abe's reputation got a little bit besmirched for a variety of reasons, none related to himself, really. But what I found in rediscovering Abe Maslow when I was in the most difficult time in my business career is that his model, the hierarchy of needs, could actually change the business world. And it started by changing my company. And then, lucky enough, I was able to use it as a model, and it's now being used around the world. So I'm excited to be here. I'm going to do my best to show how to apply positive psychology to an organizational context. But what's very true is what happens in an organization happens on a personal level as well. So when we talk about positive psychology in an organizational context, the truth is we're talking about people. And so that's very important not to forget. So you're going to see, let me see if this works. I'm a little bit of a philosopher too, and I believe that life and business is all about where you pay your attention, and you're going to see a lot of pyramids today. Not because I'm going to show you my pictures of my trip to Egypt, but because the truth is that a pyramid in the shape of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but also in the shape of many ways to look at the context of life, can be a great way to understand how you can actually look at life. And generally speaking, my perspective is that most organizations and most businesses get stuck at the bottom of the pyramid, focusing on the basics, when what's most valuable is higher up the pyramid. Now, that sounds rather abstract at this moment, but at the end of my talk, it'll make a lot more sense. Just as people experience various levels of fulfillment, here are 3 different people, 3 different experiences, and generally speaking, this is true of the American workplace. And not just the American workplace, but the worldwide workplace, is most people feel like that guy at the bottom of the pyramid. And when I say bottom of the pyramid here, I'm not necessarily talking about only the people who are at the bottom of the organizational pyramid. I mean people's relationship with their work and how they feel about it. And most people don't enjoy their work. What's true of individuals is true of companies. Here are 3 companies in a very fractured industry. The airline industry, especially in the United States, it's very difficult to make money in. One of these 3 companies, Southwest Airlines, for 40 years, has been successful. Why? Partly because they've used positive psychology. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's been a very fundamental piece of their culture. Each of us has one of 3 relationships with our work. We can either have a job, a career, or a calling. And interestingly enough, the pyramid describes the shape as well, because studies have shown that about 65%, or about 2/3 of us, think of our work as a job. About 25% of us think of our work as a career. And a small fraction, 5 to 10% of us, think of our work or act as if our work is an intrinsic motivator. It's a calling. The best companies I know out there, and the best organizations, because this is not just true of for-profit organizations, it's true of nonprofits as well, they turn this pyramid into a square. And they might have just as many people living their calling in the context of work as are living a job. For me, my calling in life was to, at age 26, as Michael said, I didn't like what I was doing. I was working for a real estate development company in San Francisco, and my primary relationship with people was arguing. Not because I wanted to argue, but I was hired to be the project manager of a big, big development. And I was supposed to construction manage it and then get tenants for it in a very bad economy. So all I did was negotiate all day long. That, or I spent my time in front of a computer and a Lotus 1-2-3 spreadsheet. Some of you know what that is. The younger ones never heard of that. But back in the day, that's how we sort of figured out the numbers. So I dealt with numbers or I dealt with negotiating. And that was it. And I hated it. So I ended up going down to the Esalen Institute. And you heard of that, right? I think so. Probably. The Esalen Institute in Big Sur. And I learned how to become a massage therapist. I was the only Stanford MBA graduate who was going to become a massage therapist when he grew up. And I loved it. But at age 25, on my 26th birthday, I said, well, how can I use my real estate background in a way to make a difference out there in the world, and in a way that's going to make me happy? And I decided I would take my real estate background and apply it to a portion of the real estate business, hotels, and a specific portion that was just getting off the ground in the United States, what are called boutique hotels. And I would create a boutique hotel company. I called it Joie de Vivre. Michael, you got close, but not quite. Joie de vivre means joy of life. And there's a lot of international folks here. And, those of us, how many French are French speaking in the audience? Yeah, so, it's a terrible name in the United States. Nobody in the United States can pronounce it, spell it, or even know what it means. But it means joy of life. And there are very few companies in the world whose name is also the mission of the company. So that's how I decided to call the company at age 26. I bought this no-tell motel that was very popular at lunchtime, but it didn't have a restaurant. You know what I mean? You caught on, yes? Yeah, hourly motel. It was called the Caravan Lodge. Anybody ever go there 25, 26 years ago? I have had people raise their hands and say, yeah, that was a different age, I called it the Phoenix Hotel, rising from the ashes, and it became a crossroads for creative people. And so there's a fundraiser. There's an organization called Burning Man, and I'm on the board of Burning Man, and I'm wearing a tie. Hard to believe. But this was a fundraiser we did for Burning Man at the Phoenix Hotel. So the hotel became a big success, against all odds. It's in a terrible neighborhood. It's a 1950s motel. It was in bankruptcy when I bought it. And what it taught me sort of quickly is that in the boutique hotel business, it's not about you are what you eat. It's about you are where you sleep. And I learned this from a person who's a famous, was he a psychologist or a psychiatrist? I think he was a psychologist, although he was giving out drugs. You know who I'm talking about? Dr. Timothy Leary. So was he a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Psychologist. Psychologist giving out drugs. So that was even worse then. No, well, let me tell you this. So Dr. Timothy Leary, in his last years of his life, was staying at the Phoenix Hotel. Now, he was 72 or 73 years old. He didn't fit the demographic of the Phoenix, and the demographics are what we look like on the outside. He fit the psychographic of the Phoenix. It was the personality, the nature of the personality of the place. So it made me start to realize that, and he actually said to me, we sat by the pool once and had a really long conversation, and he was very clear with me about the fact that what he loved about the hotel was not that it was in the ghetto or that it was a 1950s motel, but he loved the spirit of the place and the way it made him feel. There was a habitat we had created that created a sense of being young at heart and adventurous. And these are the words that he used to describe the place, which is when I had this moment of reckoning where I realized, wow, so if we are creating this habitat and it seems to be rubbing off on people, what are we doing that actually is creating that model that helps to create that almost like an identity refreshment? In fact, I will call it identity refreshment right here. And so each time we created a hotel, and over the course of 26 years, I've created 52 hotels. There's nobody in the world who's created more boutique hotels than I have. I'm really proud of that fact. And the first hotel, the Phoenix, was based upon Rolling Stone magazine. So we came up with 5 adjectives that defined the hotel, that also then defined the kind of guests we were looking for and the kind of property we created. So Rolling Stone was the model. We came up with 5 adjectives that defined Rolling Stone: funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. And everything we did in creating that hotel, from the kind of staff we hired to the kind of services we offered to the kind of restaurant we had, came back to those 5 adjectives. And what we found is that the people who fell in love with the hotel and would show up were people who were a mirror, where they saw the hotel as a mirror for their aspirations. Just like Timothy Leary, he's a funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart dude at age 72. He's no longer living. My mother is not those words. And my mother said, after that hotel was successful, she said, why don't you create a hotel that's more like for me? And so we created the Hotel Rex based upon a New Yorker, clever, literate, artistic, worldly, and sophisticated. That's more your style, right? Probably a little bit more your style. And then the Avante in Silicon Valley, based upon Wired magazine. For those of you from Chicago, there's a hotel, a newer, relatively newer hotel. A little over a year ago, we opened it called the Hotel Lincoln. It was based upon Good magazine meets Chicago. So long story short is we learned pretty quickly. And a long time ago, I was talking about psychographics and identity refreshment in the hotel industry, and they said, who are you? I mean, I was just talking in this, what they considered, they would call me the psychobabble CEO, because I would talk in these languages, but it really spoke to me that we were really trying to create a place that was a habitat that allowed people to feel at their best and allowed people to flourish in the context of a hotel. I don't know what 5 adjectives I'd use to describe the Westin Bonaventure, or whether being enormous, innocuous, and cylindrical are words, words that you want to use to describe yourself, but don't take it the wrong way if I said you're cylindrical. So long story short, based upon that strange little format of magazines and 5 adjectives and identity refreshment, we flourished. We created hotels initially all over California, now all over the US, and now with the folks who bought the company from me, and I still have a small interest, now they're going around the world. The way we actually created the company was based upon a heart. I know that sounds silly. I go back to Stanford Business School, and I go to Harvard Business School and give lectures. And they say, bring a slide that shows your business model. And of course, I bring this heart, and they look at me like I'm an idiot, and maybe I am. But what I know is this. The thing that actually pumps the heart of an organization is a unique corporate culture. My belief is that culture is infectious. And why is culture infectious? It's because emotions are contagious. And because emotions are contagious, in the petri dish of an organization, it's important to get the culture right. So we grew as a company very fast, and becoming the second largest in the US as a boutique hotelier, based upon corporate culture. That leads to an enthusiastic staff, which leads to strong customer loyalty, which leads to a profitable and sustainable business. The leading indicators of success in business, the leading indicator is not point number 4. That's the lagging indicator. Point number 1, 2, and 3 are the inputs that create number 4, the output. Unfortunately, most people in business don't know that. And they, in fact, are so impatient to get to point number 4 that they don't allow point number 1, 2, and 3 to work first. So if we have time for Q&A at the end, I can talk a little bit more about that. But I call this karmic capitalism. What goes around comes around. If you treat your people well, especially in a service business, it's called the service profit chain. A group of Harvard Business School professors, Harvard Business School professors about 30 years ago showed there is a connection between great culture and profitability over the course of time.